Had a wrong number. Go ahead.
So it was kind of like a nursing home, and she went to work for Mrs. Paul. Uh, by then, she had married my father, and I don't know if she worked before they were married, but I remember they sent me down to the Russell family after school. They looked after me. And I didn't like it because there were all boys in that family and they teased me. Anyway, then she became a nurse for Dr. Coe for a while, and he had a house they had converted into a hospital. And she worked there. Then my father, after they were married, they had went out on the farm, and Mother said he had bought a matched team of Belgian horses, and the Depression hit, and he lost the horses and couldn't stay on the farm, so he came to town, and he became a day worker. A day worker went to a workers' pool, and farmers and what have you would come in and choose different men to go work. And my dad had a job every day, different places, and but he didn't have just one job. Then Bert Shellington in our town hired him and he became a butter and egg man. And that was where farmers brought in their sour cream and eggs and for money, and until the crops came in and they could sell their crops. And my father did that for a number of years. And on Saturday nights, the farmers would bring in the sour cream and eggs. And in the summer, it was Saturday nights and Wednesday nights. And my mother would go up and make out the checks for them so they could to pay them for what they brought in. Then when I was in junior high, my mother was a waitress, and the Harts owned a restaurant there in town. And the Harts retired and sold it to two sisters whose names were Myers and Busby. And that was where the name of the MB Cafe came from. And the two sisters ran it for several years, and then they wanted to sell it, and my mother was waitressing for them. And she went to my dad and said, by this time the Second World War was on, and a company called Blue Star had come in and bought Bert Shellington's business. And my dad did not like working for them at all. And so she said, let's borrow the money from your brother George, who was a farmer and had money, and buy the restaurant. And they did. They didn't own the building. The building was owned by a banker there in town, but of course they owned what was inside the building and the business, and you buy that. And so they went into it, and we lived we had always been renters around town until we finally ended up in Grandpa's house when Grandmother died. Mother inherited that house, and she bought her brother's interest out, and my dad did that and put it in Mother's name. The house always belonged to Mother. And they had a foster brother. Do you want to hear that story? There was a woman was in town. She was a farm girl, came to town and worked in a maid in homes. And a guy came to town with the railroad and got her pregnant. And then this guy got on a train and left, and the communication was not like it was today, and they don't ever know what happened to him. Anyway, she was pregnant, and she, the women in town didn't want her to work for them anymore. She was immoral. So my grandfather, who was the town cop, took her to, well, first he found a place out in the country for her to work. And then she came and said they didn't want her anymore, and he took her to a place in Pender, which was a town 18 miles from Wakefield, and where she had the baby. And he was a red-headed baby. And my grandfather was red-headed. No one in the family has ever had that red-headed hair since. But anyway, she was very sickly, and they didn't expect her to live. And I have a paper at home in my cedar chest where she had a judge, in front of a judge, had given that little boy to my grandparents to raise, you know. So it was as legal as it could be in those days, an adoption. And so they raised my Uncle Elvin, and when he got old enough, he joined the Air Force, and he was a photographer. In later years, everybody lost touch with him, don't know what ever happened to him.
Wow.
But when my grandmother died,
Yeah.
You come up here,
Well, keep going and it'll record. Keep going.
when my grandmother died, he signed his interest over to Mother.
Keep going. Dad prompted her.
So they were in the restaurant, and all the time that I was in junior high and high school, and then I went off to college. They kept it through my college years, and the year I finished college, they closed it on New Year's Eve and never opened the restaurant again. They sold it to another couple.
So they'd been in it about 12 or 13 years.
Yeah, they were in it about 12 years. Although I finished college in three years, so I don't know, 10 years maybe.
Well, they went in 41. You said during the war.
Yeah, it was early in the war, 41 or 42, and we got married in 53. And they had just gotten out of it and
Probably
redid the house.
11 or 12.
And my dad died in 1975 after they retired from the. He helped a plumber there in town, Henske, who had a young man who had come back from the war. Louis Henske, he helped him with plumbing for a while, and then he ended up with Hugh Beaton, who had a nursery in town. And my mother always said he was a frustrated farmer because he loved those plants in that nursery like they were his own. And then for a while he took a truck and had a route that he went all the towns up and around there in the spring selling flats of flowers and tomato plants, and that did the route. And he loved that nursery, taking care of all those plants. And he died in 1975 at age 75. My mother survived him for 15 years, and she died at 89.
So,
and I settled her estate, and I sold the house that my grandfather had built.
Who bought it?